You are tuned into Mostly Humans. The opinions and views shared by the hosts of this podcast are uniquely their own and do not reflect the view or opinions of the companies they work for. P.S. Don't sue or fire us. Thanks so much. Now let's get into the episode. Coming to you from the future, it reminds me of the Miss Cleo infomercials back in the day, which
Oh my gosh,
many people may remember.
that wasn't just like local. I thought that was like local to my weird town. That was like a national thing.
National thing that they made to look very local and very low budget, shockingly. So
She was like one of the original, like, I would say, like, influencer or marketer type of things, because you know how like these days on like Instagram and I'm assuming TikTok. I've never been on TikTok, dating myself, but how like someone intentionally films something grainy. They're almost like always in a parking lot on their phone.
yeah.
And they're like, guys, I just have to tell you about this under eye cream. It's so amazing.
All right. Welcome back to Mostly Humans, an AI and business podcast for everyone. We break down complex topics and the latest in AI to benefit you, the everyday person, and help showcase how these tools can impact your business operations today. Definitely a business operations kind of episode, but we'll get into that when we get to it. I am Justin Wright. I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Bigelow, who's a road warrior this week. Matt, how you been?
Yes, coming to you live from an undisclosed location in San Francisco, where I've awkwardly positioned my camera so that you can't see my messy hotel room. It looks like I'm actually someplace kind of nice. So I got my back all twisted up just to look professional over here. But things are
There you
going
go.
pretty good. I know you had a busy week. How was your week shaping up?
Yeah, it's good. Just as you know, Matt, the startup world, you go to launch customers and everybody needs things at the same time, and you're moving quick and trying to make it happen. So it's been a fun week, but we had some good progress and a little bit of organized chaos. We're getting ready we have an engineering offsite coming up in a couple weeks actually. So I'll be on the road to Vegas, which I think is where you're headed next week, right?
Yes. So my company will be out over at HR Tech. By the time someone hears this, the event is already probably passed, and it was awesome. Coming to you from the future, it was wonderful. We brought on so many customers and prospects, and the world of HR is embracing AI, and we were the star of the show.
The star of the show. That's it. I like it. The coming to you from the future. It reminds me of the Miss Cleo infomercials back in the day, which
Oh my
many
gosh,
people may remember.
that wasn't just like local. I thought that was like local to my weird town. That was like a national thing.
National thing that they made to look very local and very low budget, shockingly. So
She was like one of the original, like, I would say, like, influencer or marketer type of things, because you know how like these days on like Instagram and I'm assuming TikTok. I've never been on TikTok, dating myself, but how like someone intentionally films something grainy. They're almost like always in a parking lot on their
yeah.
phone. And they're like, guys, I just have to tell you about this under eye cream. It's so amazing. And like that sells though, because it does feel real. And like I feel like they were like one of the first ones to do that.
Yeah, Miss Cleo, the original influencer. It's actually funny because I spent my fair share of time in the production world, and we were doing trying to do like big budget Super Bowl style regional commercials, like bringing in all the crews, very talented people, and then there's this whole wave of stuff where they literally just want stuff filmed on a phone. Or they're like, hey, can you shoot this vertically? Or can you actually just shoot this whole commercial on your iPhone? And it killed us inside, but that's what people want. So that, they want the real, authentic looking, you'll never guess what I just discovered, whether it's, eye cream or something else. So that's where media is heading, I guess.
And it's always from like a Target parking lot. They're always
Yep.
in Target, just on their phone. It's just like, they're out running errands. But the second they park their car, they're like, you know what? I need to tell everyone that I know on my phone about this eye cream. Like, who would
That
stop
I
in the middle of their
conveniently
errands?
just picked up at Target that I
Yeah.
wasn't paid to do, but I'm here. Oh man. Yeah, don't go on TikTok. It's a terrible place. I think you should resist as long as possible. Hold off as long as you can.
Any before we get into today's episode, which I think is an exciting topic, or actually not so much an exciting topic, but definitely an interesting topic. Any quick AI like quick hitting advice you have for the folks out there, or any tools you came across this week that you liked?
So allow me to go down the rabbit hole slightly. Uh, so vibe coding, we did our vibe coding episode and it's very popular. There is now a thing called swarm coding, like a swarm of bees, maybe. So imagine a swarm of AI bees writing your software. But the point being, what you do is, and if you're using Claude Code, you can do this. You can give it a bunch of instructions in different files. And so what people are doing is they're building teams of agents in Claude. So you'll have like your product manager agent, you'll have a couple developers, like your front end agent, your back end agent. You have like a scrum master who's basically the person cracking the whip, keeping things on track and dummy checking all the code. And so I've been playing around with a little bit of that stuff. And it's interesting because a lot of the downsides of vibe coding where it'll just write something incorrect. And we were joking about this on that episode where you're just like, hey, that actually doesn't work. And it'll be like, you're totally right. I messed that entire code base up. So with this swarm approach where you have different agents handling very specific pieces of the development, there was a story that I read where there was a guy who started or built an MVP for a new product. And he basically set all these agents to start working when he took off on a flight. And by the time he landed 6 hours later, he had an entire product with like a UI and interface built and working, which is kind of crazy. So I've been dabbling a little bit in that, which, again, might be too deep down the rabbit hole, but I found it to be pretty cool.
I want to try this. So is there a platform or a product for this, or you're kind of like stitching together known commodities already that we have in AI?
Yeah, so I'm doing it in Claude Code, which is like it runs in a coding environment, basically in the terminal. And then what you basically just define a bunch of the different agents in individual files. And there's like a folder structure that you can use within Claude where it'll basically reference each of the correct agents to do the correct task. And you give it like a whole high level instruction, like that orchestration stuff we were talking about. So you have a document that basically defines the orchestration or how they work together. And then you have each of the individual documents that describes, which is basically just like a in-depth prompt, like, hey, you're a product manager. Your job is to make sure that the product meets certain specifications and to ask questions and check and make sure things are working, yada, yada, yada. And so you have individual prompts for each of the agents, and then you give it like your initial prompt or design, and then it kind of just lets everything run wild and build it.
Gosh, that sounds awesome. I'm definitely going to give that a try.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Getting Claude Code installed is a little, a little interesting depending on which platform you're working in. But once you get it, it's great.
Nice. So what's on the docket for today? What are we chatting about?
So today we are going to talk about an MIT study that kind of went viral in the AI space where they claimed that 95% of AI pilots fail in business applications. And so they cited a bunch of different source companies. They had some very specific parameters, which we'll get into, which I think, I don't want to say invalidates the study, but I think actually lends itself to asking more questions. But given that a lot of our target audience, they do work in business to some capacity, or they're trying to maybe bring some of these tools into their companies. We've been talking about these custom GPTs and all this other stuff. I think it's an interesting and relevant topic to discuss. And I'd love to hear maybe your high level initial thoughts on the study, when it came out, and then we can dig into some specific pieces of it and peel back the layers.
Yeah. So it was a really big deal, at least in my little bubble of my algorithms. So my LinkedIn, my YouTube, it was all about this. Basically, every leader had their own thought on why a lot of these projects are failing, and I think a lot of it was interesting. But I think a lot of people are basically saying the same thing, which is the reason these projects are failing. This is not what the MIT article says, but rather like what I saw a lot of CEOs saying about their businesses, is because expectations are kind of like misaligned for what the stuff does. Right? So the common consensus amongst people is AI is scary and intense, and it's also magical, and it does all the things and you don't have to think about it. And if you don't spend a lot of time dialed into it the way you and I are, like in the thick of it, in the foxhole with our customers and our products, really putting tangible hard work and elbow grease into making them, what they want it to be, you might actually think that it's like magic and AGI, ASI coming for us all. It's connected to everything. It's disrupting everything. And in reality, there's like a lot of code, a lot of effort, a lot of UIs, a lot of rules, and a lot of testing that need to be done, like any good, high quality enterprise grade software, to make it really meaningful. And that's what I saw from a lot of the people in my feeds, which I respected. It wasn't a lot of CEOs saying, hey, the reason all these projects are failing is because everyone's product stinks and mine's the best and mine's the only one that works. It's like, as a collective, they were like, guys, we got to really set our expectations right. Yes, the final outcomes can be magical because you're seeing text streaming across the screen, doing really smart stuff with your data and following your company policy. And like, it feels human, but it takes a lot of work still to get there. It doesn't set itself up. It doesn't build itself. Like most machines, it almost only does what you tell it to do. Now, there is a probabilistic aspect to it, but we can build deterministic stuff to say, do this, do this, do this. Don't go too far here. Don't go too far there. Here, here, here. And then I'm going to press enter. And then you can do some probabilistic stuff after I have pared down what I want you to be able to do. And it's that whole paring down process that can take a long time. So if your expectations are, it feels magical end outcome, so the onboarding is going to be magical, then of course, a lot of these projects, people are going to pull the plug. That's kind of what I saw in my feeds, and I agree with a lot of what I saw.
Yeah. All right. Beautiful. So a quick blip in the recording. What happened was Matt got so excited about the study and the applications of business that he waved his arms in a dramatic fashion and unplugged his headphones. So we had to restart the recording.
You could say it was because I was excited, but the truth is it's because I'm an Italian from Jersey, and we do a lot of this as we talk. And this, we run the risk, because I am in this hotel room. Normally I have a longer headphone cord. It's pretty short for those who are watching on YouTube. We run the risk that might happen again. So I apologize in advance. I'm going to try to keep my hands down at 10 and 2, but who knows?
Got to be careful. I got to make sure I'm not making any, mind-blowing points mid arm wave. I got to really time this up. But what I was going to say is it's funny because some of our viewers may be kind of wondering why we're discussing this topic, because while it applies to a lot of, people in business and in tech, it might not apply to your average person. But I actually think it's an incredibly important thing to talk about because it validates a lot of the points that we've been discussing in earlier episodes, particularly this future of work concept where we don't believe that AI is going to blow up the world, at least not in its current state. And, a lot of these dramatic posts that you see, to Matt's point on that episode is from people who have vested interest in getting investor dollars or getting people to use their products. And so the reality is it's incredibly difficult to deploy these things at scale, which also is reassuring for those of you who may have gotten a computer science degree and you're seeing people vibe or swarm coding and you're wondering what that means for you. The reality is to get this technology to work in business settings, in the real world, not demos, in the real world, there's still a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done. And that's not a bad thing for AI. I think it's just a good thing for humanity, or at least a reassuring thing for your average person now, that you can't just push a button and the AI figures everything out and is suddenly able to deploy at scale in an enterprise company overnight. It's the biggest thing in this study, at least in terms of the timelines that they were looking at, is they were basically looking at pilots that went from pilot stage to production in enterprise in 6 months or less, which in reality, I think is probably not enough time, especially if you look at very highly regulated industries. And kind of one of the things that I want to put back to you, Matt, is given your experience working with larger enterprise companies, starting to deploy some of these things at scale, what does that look like, or what do you think are the key elements for people who may be trying to bring AI into their company and actually have this work at scale?
Well, I have a quick question before I respond, because as you all know, Justin is a details guy. I'm just here to talk, really, just to support him. I'm just kidding, but I didn't read the study in depth like you did, and I am curious. Were they talking about build pilots, meaning like they building these things for themselves in the enterprise, or were they talking about buy pilots, where like a lot of these projects were they bought them from vendors, and those projects are falling down?
It's buying from vendors, basically deploying vendor solutions into their companies. So trying to actually and to that end, a lot of the issues were in things that'll be no surprise to you, like integrations with business technology, actually making sure that the AI solutions have access to the systems that they need, the difference between a demo or a very narrow focused test and then actually rolling out to a broader customer base. So it's vendor purchases deployed at scale to real customers.
Okay, cool. It's an important data point, but then it means we're even more qualified, really, frankly, to talk about it. So I'll put it to you this way: when I was a young lad, I worked for a company. It was a job seeker website, and we had a homegrown CRM. Like literally, we didn't use Salesforce, we didn't use Sugar CRM, we didn't use Dynamics. We literally used a homegrown CRM. It was actually kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie. Like it was cool. We built it ourselves. It was very, very super hyper specific to what we were doing at the time. So let's say folks like that. I'm assuming they finally eventually bought some real software company's CRM, but let's assume that they were still doing that. If they wanted to use agents for some sort of like a sales, marketing, or customer support use case, well, the CRM, the customer relationship management software that they use, which is where all the sales reps put all their details, the customer success managers, the support reps, everything that happens regarding an account or a client, everyone logs everything in there. That's why it's nice and organized. It's like a filing cabinet for every interaction with that customer. So much of what they would want to actually get done from an agentic standpoint would be doing the things that humans would do, the things that sales reps would do, the marketing campaigns that marketing would run. The way that we would handle a support ticket might be different if we know something about them that they had a bad experience last week. So if a human would look that up and then support them differently because they know this person's kind of on edge right now, the agent should do that. The sales rep should know the context of the different cross sells that we are working right now, and that this person kind of off the record said something not so great about this decision maker. And we took a note about that in the CRM and make sure that we don't hype up this person that we know that they kind of have a problem with. This is the kind of stuff that humans have always done. We enter data into the systems, we read the data from the systems, and then we try to do intelligent work with it to better our companies, get to our goals, reach our KPIs. Well, if that company wanted to do any of the three use cases I mentioned, now the agent company that they're partnering with has to figure out how to integrate with the CRM that that company built for themselves, because that's where all that data lives. So now their engineering team that has nothing to do with this project, maybe the support team brought on the project or the sales team brought on the project or the marketing team, they're like, hey, engineering team, I know you're busy working on core IP for our company, but this vendor that we bought this software from needs to access all of this data. And they're like, we built this CRM for ourselves. Yeah, but just hook it up, right? Like, you know how things work? And they're like, we would need an API for that. Okay, well, what's the API? Well, we don't have one. Now we have to stop everything we're doing to build one. They build one. They get like an MVP. They kind of shove it out the door. Minimum viable product, MVP, for those who don't know. Like just basically the cheapest and quickest and easiest way to get this off their plate so they can get back to what they're supposed to do as an engineering team and give it to the marketing team or support team. Marketing or support team, not that technical, brings it back to the vendor. And they're like, hey, vendor, look, API is here. I don't know what this means, but they gave me this thing. It's a token and here's a link. And they said you'd know what to do with it. Vendors like, okay, let me give it a shot. And for some reason it breaks or it doesn't work. Or you can ping the API, but you can only ping it once every 30 minutes. And they wanted our assistants to handle up to, let's say, 10,000 customer support interactions every minute. Now we got to go back. But I'm just talking about one part of the platform. Think about all of us as human beings. As human beings, we don't just access one platform at work, we access a bunch. So if agents are supposed to take on and do human work and do smart things with data the way we all do, that would just be one part of one system, right? And then we have to start to actually go get more systems. And then we have to orchestrate how these things work. The point that I'm making here is the end outcome would actually be fantastic if everybody was bought in the enterprise and moving in the same direction and the right people were read in to the project and everyone had the expectation that the end outcome feels like magic, but getting there feels oddly familiar with normal enterprise software, then
Hmm.
I think a lot of these projects actually would succeed. But like I came from the digital transformation space before I got into AI, and digital transformation um, are big, huge, large projects involving global systems integrators, channel partners, like 3 or 4 different large enterprise software like SAP, Workday, SuccessFactors. Sorry, Salesforce is what I meant to say. Um, Atlassian, huge legacy software players and big efforts across multiple geographies. They're huge, those projects. Global transformation, digital transformation projects, they can take up to 24, 36 months to get done. And companies invest tens of millions in the professional services alone,
Hmm.
which means the humans connecting everything and going, okay, policy needs to be different in India than it needs to be in North America because of, suffice it to say, that project is still worth it. Digital transformation projects have always been worth it. AI projects are worth it. How do you define failure is really from how are you judging it going into it? And when you thought it was really cool that you went to Suno AI and typed in 3 sentences about your cat, and then it made a song that sounds like Drake, going in and out of rapping and singing about your cat, and you think it's amazing. So you're like, oh my God, imagine what the marketing software is going to look like. And you don't pay attention to the details. You don't have the expectation that it's going to feel like normal enterprise software. Then you might pull the plug and be like, this pilot's, it's a sunk cost, 150K sunk cost, get it off the books. AI is not ready for prime time, done. And I think a lot of people think that way. I think a lot of people, a lot of consumer experiences are driving how B2B decision makers feel about this stuff and what their expectation is. And it's totally wrong. This is still old school software, and it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that it's bad.
No, 100%. And I think that one of the things missing from the study that is valid is a comparison to baseline expectations for traditional software. Like, how long does it take to actually roll out a major software overhaul in a non-AI capacity at some of these companies, and seeing, like, is a 6-month expectation realistic if you're looking at a 12 to 24-month rollout for other systems? Now, the meat of this discussion, and the whole reason I thought talking about this topic was relevant, is because I do believe that a lot of the people who probably tune into this podcast are individuals who maybe are trying to become that AI person at their company, or at least introduce some of these tools to their companies at a small scale. Maybe even if it's just starting with their teams or building some custom GPTs for a few of the teams that they closely collaborate with. And if this can really help accelerate your career if you're introducing these tools to your company, but it's important to do it the right way, because what you don't want to do is be pushing for all of this change, get into one of those scenarios where a pilot fails because you didn't anticipate what's actually required to make it work. And it all boils down to just setting expectations properly within the organization with the vendors that you're working with. And I think, what we can really dig into for kind of the rest of this discussion is, what are the things that are actually necessary if you are trying to introduce these tools to your company? What are the things that you should be thinking about to make sure that your pilot is a success if you're out there shopping for vendors? And the last little tidbit from the study that I thought was really interesting that kind of inspires this discussion is, they found that bottom-up adoption, or employees using tools, whether they're paying for them out of pocket and getting reimbursed, or just actually building this stuff into their personal workflows, the adoption there is incredibly high. So while they were looking at pilots at the enterprise level, company-wide failing, quote unquote, the actual AI adoption from individual employees and from this bottom-up approach is substantially higher and has a lot more success. So I think digging into that is a really interesting place to take this.
Yeah. Well, my opinion on why bottoms up works is because I'll use like Anthropic and XAI and OpenAI, for example. Their sales reps basically sell like two things to their customers. They sell them access to the APIs, which again is just like a way for you as a company. Let's say I'm selling to a really large CPG company and I work at OpenAI. That large CPG company might want to do experiments with large language models, build something cool and agentic into their CPG app or something like that. So they buy the API, right? That's a technical tool for the technical people to play with LLMs. And those companies are making money hand over fist doing that. I believe OpenAI's revenues are over 10 billion at this point. The other thing that they sell is the bottoms up solution, which is just ChatGPT Enterprise, Claude Enterprise. And what does that mean? It just means the company fits the bill for us to not have to like pay $20 a month and then we use too much credits and now it's $60 a month. The company fits the bill and says, hey, for the whole company, this whole CPG company, we want you guys to start using AI. We bought you guys all access to an unlimited B2B license. We have custom GPTs in there. You can share custom GPTs with your colleagues. You can collaborate in there, but it's basically just ChatGPT fully paid for you by your company. And your company, it also means that the things that you type into the box don't train the model. As consumers, when we type into the box, we do train the model because businesses don't want their models to get trained on their business data. And so I think when bottoms up projects go well, it's because that's not really agentic work. And that's fine. And that's a great place to start. Like if you are trying to build your career around being an AI innovator at your company, let's say you learned a lot about your domain, the industry that you're in, you know a lot about CPG and you like technology and you want to make sure that you have a relevant career moving forward. And you want to find the intersection of how can you take all this great stuff about what you know about CPG and supply chain and AI and bring it together? The easiest way to start is a bottoms up product where people can just use ChatGPT and ask it things. And if your company doesn't have an enterprise license, a lot still don't. An enterprise license to a large language models chatbot, you can bring that into your company and it's going to be like the same time people first experience ChatGPT, they're going to praise you for it and they're going to be more productive and people are going to do creative things with it. Where it starts to fall down on the agentic side is that the buyers, like let's say I'm like a brand designer for that CPG company. I collaborate with marketing a lot. I also collaborate with like customer success type folks and stuff just to figure out like how we can continue to do brand marketing. And I'm going to get this agentic platform for marketing and bring it into my company. I don't know a lot about digital transformation, a lot about software onboarding, and a lot about AI. So if I'm going to go outside of the bottoms up approach, the advice that we should be giving to those people, you and I, is simple. Instead of being like, oh, think about this technical nuance and that one, just tell everybody it's going to take 3 times longer than you think it's going to take. So whatever the vendor tells you, the vendor is not going to lie to you, but they're going to say, hey, if you guys really lean in, if you give us access to some technical people on your side who we might need to ask and nudge for some questions here and there, and you do all this and that, and we meet regularly and this, that, and the other thing, you could probably get you live in 3 months. That's a lot of caveats. So if they say 3, tell your boss 9. That's like a simple place to just start. And it's just don't listen to the vendor. The vendor's always going to tell you in an ideal state, and the vendor will meet you. If they're worth their weight in salt, the vendor will meet with you as much as you are willing to meet. But your company and the people that you're going to invite to the call are probably not going to be as eager to jump on the call as you are, and you need their help. So the vendor's legit. They could get done in 3 months if you were willing to help them, but maybe not everyone in your company is. So start there. That's the first piece of advice I had. How about you?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think high level, my advice would be if you're trying to incorporate agentic workflows, think about how you would have to train a human to do that job and actually take stock of all of these systems, all of the steps, how you would onboard somebody to your team if you're trying to build an agent to do some of the workflows that your team is managing now. Think about how you currently onboard your humans, because the machines are only going to be as intelligent as the information that you give them. And in much the same way that if you have a new hire, there's probably some boxes that you need to check, some documents you need to share, some policies and procedures, some systems access that you have to, get IT to give them. And so think about how many departments are involved in you just onboarding a new employee that joins your team at your company. And the larger the company, there's probably a lot more departments that are involved in that process. So I would start there, because that's the same point that we're making, that these AI systems need access, or these AI agents rather need access to all these systems. So it's the same thing as onboarding a new human. So start there. Also think about the type of industry that you're in. If you're in a highly regulated industry, you obviously want to look at vendors who have the technical certifications and security protocols to manage that. And you want to look at people building for those specific industries. But think about how much goes into your legal and compliance department. Think about traditional software purchases and maybe the hurdles that you have to go through to get that stuff to work. So my advice is really, in summary, is be as prepared as you can for the initial internal pitch. You find a vendor or a product that you think is interesting, you need to be as prepared as you can to then pitch that to your company or to whoever the decision maker will be, and make sure that you've, crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's in terms of who needs to be involved, what systems do we actually need to give this thing access to, and how do I get approval internally to grant access to those systems, because that's what's going to turn that 3 months into 9 months on top of the time it actually takes to build this stuff.
Yeah, well said. I think here's what I need everyone listening to this to know. The technology works. All this stuff works. A failed pilot doesn't mean that agentic agentic products don't work. Justin and I build them every single day. They absolutely work. And it's mind-blowing when you see them work. It requires a lot of iteration, because really what is agentic work really? Like, if I really dumb it down and take the marketing spin out of it, it's flexible automation, right? It's automation in the gray. Automation tools have forever just been very ones and zeros, black and white. If this happens, do this, else do that. And it's very, very deterministic. Like, if you were off by one character, you didn't capitalize something, the rule would break and the automation wouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
What agents can do is they can operate in the gray. They can do automation. You could say, be friendly, instead of say this exact thing. You could say, be friendly. And here is our policy. So the thing can read through your policy, understand generally, because it understands language, what your policy means. And then when they get an input from a user about something, they're like, okay, I understand language, large language model really well. I understand generally what this policy is going for because I understand language really well. And I was told to be polite. So I could automate this thing, even though it's not an exact one for one. They didn't exactly say this. I don't exactly say that. And we give it the freedom to automate in the gray, right? In that area. That kind of stuff, it takes time to do. And also, you don't always like how it operates in the gray, right? So the technology works, but it's a lot of experimentation. It's a lot of testing. And you're like, oh, I love the autonomous choice it made over here in the gray, but I don't like it over here. So then it's kind of back to the drawing board and getting it started again. But the stuff does work. It's not that 95%. Like, if I was an AI doomsdayer, I would have saw the headline from MIT and been like, yes, I told you guys this tech doesn't work. And I hate to spoil it for that person. The tech does work, but it takes a while to get this stuff done. And what you said, Justin, is really important, because a lot of people are trying to bring AI products into their company. A family member of mine bought, luckily this family owner is the owner of the business, but was going to buy this sales AI software. And I was like, please let me look at it before you do that. Like, let me see what they're about. Like, I'm like, please, it's because he had all these ideas of what it was going to do and how it was going to do all the texting for them and the reminders and do the sales for them and whatever. And of course, it's a failure. He wants his money back, and he's probably out over $10,000, right? But at least he's not going to get yelled at by his manager for it because he is the manager. I'm sure that software works, but I could have inspected it for him and told him like, oh, there's a lot of work that's going to go into this, right? But what you said is so smart. People who buy, like this family member of mine, who buy this technology based off of a sales pitch, the sales pitch isn't a lie. The marketing isn't a lie, but there's details. So let's say I am a customer success leader for a SaaS company. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to bring in this like QBR agent that does the QBRs, the quarterly business reviews for my CSMs, and it prepares everything and it does the data and all this stuff. I may think to myself, I'm a senior director of customer success. Like, I know technology. Like, I just got to give it access to Tango, and I got to give it access to Salesforce, and I got to give it access to Tableau. Like, I can just generate a seat like I do when I have a new employee. That's not how an agent works. You don't give it a login with an email. But it's logical to think that. But actually, the agent will access via API that system. There might be a chance that the company, let's say your customer success software that you want the agent to access, they might have like two APIs, like two endpoints in their API is what I should say, where you can like read one thing and do one thing. And you made all these assumptions that as long as it's integrated, the agent can do anything. The agent can only do what the source platform allows it to go do. But you didn't know that. So Justin, you're right to tell everyone, think about everything you would teach a human and everything you would give the human access to and how you would train them to use it. You're basically training an AI to do that. And on top of that, you as a manager or a leader know how to generate someone a license, hopefully, and get them logged in and then show them around the UI and how to do their thing. You have actually no idea how a machine does that when it talks to another machine. It's not the same. So learn everything and think about everything you'd have to train the human on, and then go do your digging into the systems you need the AI agent to access, and find out if they even have those things before you buy anything, right? Like if it's Salesforce, of course, like Salesforce has got a zillion endpoints. You can get and do anything you want in Salesforce with an agent, of course. But like that's something that people aren't thinking about, and they're left with egg on their face internally. But I love how you're speaking to the people who want to kind of build their career around AI and giving them these warnings, and how we're also reminding them that the tech really does work, but set extremely long expectations for people, and also go do your homework. And you guys can DM us. We're available.
Yeah.
Like DM us, we'll help you if you want us to like look at some of the software you're looking at and see if we can like kind of guide you the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I work on scoping and implementing these solutions for customers every day. And I will tell all of you something in full honesty is the onboarding process is painful for everyone involved. It is not something that you just push a couple buttons and it works, even for the best products, because AI is probabilistic. You have to go through testing and iterations. You have to get the tone right, the brand voice right, the prompts right. That all takes time. But the benefit of doing it with an AI tool, as opposed to just hiring another human, is once you train the agent or your AI solution how to do these processes, then it can continue to do those processes in the future. There is still the pain of onboarding the AI agent. Like that's never going to go away. And I don't think we'll ever get to a place where you can just click one button, everything like boop, 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 boop works and you're good to go. The reality is there is that short-term pain of training, of setup, of integrations, of all the things. But again, we work in AI. The beauty of it is when you do spend that time once and you do it right and you invest adequate time to connect everything and tune and train and get things to a place where it needs to be, the beauty of it is then it just works. Then it does all these crazy things that all of the vendors will tell you that their product does because it can do those things. And I think that this study really highlighted the fact that there is difficulty in getting these pilots off the ground and actually getting things into production. And I would also tell you, to Matt's point about, his family member, if you are that type of person who's trying to bring AI tools into your business, do your homework, be very careful because it's very easy to spin up a demo. Like the one click, boop, 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 things just working. It works great for a demo. And you can build something that looks fantastic in a very short period of time. You can vibe code a product that with a UI that looks amazing and looks way better than another vendor in the space. But the actual deployment at scale in your business is where all of these demos start to fall apart. And there is true complexity involved in actually getting this stuff to work in production with your customers, especially if it's a large company. And so if you are going to be that person, to Matt's original point, it's going to take at least 3 times longer than you think it will because of all the people who need to be involved. And then the thing that I see a lot that I think the industry is still getting educated on, and I'd be interested to hear your take on this, is a lot of people go through that process of prompting and updating and testing and retesting, and they expect it to be perfect out of the box and get very discouraged when it's not. And I think people assume that means this stuff doesn't work or the technology isn't good enough yet. But the reality is that is the process, no matter which vendor you work with, no matter which product you use. It does take time. And I think if you go into it understanding that, it will make using these tools far less painful.
Yeah. I mean, do we agree that magic isn't real? Like we know like magic tricks, like just like old school magic, rabbit out of the hat, right? What do you see on stage? You see a rabbit coming out of a hat. You see, it's gruesome, but the thing with the saw in the box, I never really like that. I find that to be disturbing. But we see the end magic trick, right? What do we all also know if we really ask ourselves in a moment of truth? Did they just like wake up one day and they'd be like, hey, I'm just going to go up there with the top hat and it's going to show that it's empty. And then all of a sudden I'm going to pull a rabbit out of the hat and it's going to be great. It's like, no, months and months and months of like engineering some hat. I don't even know how the trick works, but engineering a hat or using a mirror that reflects on another mirror that makes something look the way it looks, and the lighting and the smog and the smoke in the room, and tons and tons and tons of practice equals boom, a magic trick, right? And we all know it's not actually magic, but a lot went into it if we stop and ask ourselves. But all we see is the show and we clap our hands, right? The end outcome of people using consumer AI feels magical, and it's called artificial intelligence. It's not called artificial onboarding and integration and setup and protocol and testing. But I really
Not as
believe
catchy. Not as catchy.
no, you know me with these long taglines every episode. But like, I know like we might think about like enterprise, like Fortune 1000, B2B buyers and executives as like these super, super smart people and stuff. And they are, but they're just humans, man. And a lot of them are not spending a lot of time like in like enterprise deployments of AI. Their experience with AI feels pretty magical in their pocket. They can have it make a song about their dog, or they can ask it any question, or they can get daily fantasy football advice custom to their needs. And like, it's insane, right? But all that is just streaming text. It's not doing replacing humans at a business that's regulated and has policy and all of that stuff. So the technology absolutely works, and it's still enterprise software. And I've been working in enterprise software and digital transformation almost my entire career. And guess what? The biggest companies in the world that you invest in, probably if you're in like, if you're investing in the stock market, especially in like large funds or whatever, is like Microsoft and Google and IBM and Salesforce and Oracle and SAP. All those companies, they're the tech titans of the world. No one knows more about technology than them, and their softwares and their transformation projects take years to deploy. And the juice is always worth the squeeze. This is a new style of end outcome. Juice still worth the squeeze. But I really believe that like it's just too darn fun and too easy to use the consumer products. So you make a tremendous amount of assumptions about what the B2B stuff is going to do. And for our listeners, because most of our listeners probably aren't the buyers, or like the decision maker, I should say. They might be the one pushing for it. Set the expectations internally right. Use what you learned on this podcast to educate your coworkers. Access to systems is tough. The thing is probabilistic. Of the first couple tests that we're going to do aren't going to be great. We're going to hit roadblocks. We're going to have to work with departments internally we never worked with before because we have to get access to data and stuff that we never thought about. This thing is not like ChatGPT. This thing is not like Claude. This thing is not like Suno AI. I don't know why I keep bringing them up. Maybe I'm fishing for a sponsor or something. Good, cool product though. And it's not those things. And this is going to be just like if we were going to do a global deployment of a new CPQ technology at work. And then all of a sudden you're going to look like a hero because you set the expectations right. But remind everyone, this is not ChatGPT.
Yeah. It may be powered by the same fundamental stuff, but it's a very different process to deploy. And there are so many things to consider. I really like that you brought up the rabbit in a hat. I grew up loving Magic. Like I was a big David Copperfield guy. We went to some of his shows or whatever. And there's actually, if anybody wants an incredibly interesting book, probably one of the better books I've ever read. It's a book called Fooling Houdini by Alex Stone. And it's about a guy and his journey basically learning how some of these magic tricks work. He does a lot of card magic and he just kind of obsesses over the process and the history. And it's kind of his journey to becoming a magician and doing like a card magic show live, but all the stuff that he learns along the way. And it's really, really interesting. So if you even are tangentially interested in magic and you want to read a really well-written book, it's called Fooling Houdini. Highly, highly recommend.
I'm very interested in that. I'll also say, have you ever seen a mentalist in person?
Yeah, wild.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's basically like just magic, but like on a whole, like mostly using words, like less like props and whatnot. Oh my gosh. Like Oz Perlman, are you familiar with him?
Oh, yeah.
He came to my company once, actually the company with the homegrown CRM. He came to our company. I was disturbed for weeks. I couldn't sleep at night. I was like, I think other humans really know how to read minds. I'm like, I'm in serious trouble.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like, if you think about it, a lot of these AI tools kind of work like mentalists because what they're doing is they know patterns of language. They know how to predict. They're able to anticipate what you're going to say based on what you've just said in context or your reaction to certain questions that they're asking. So they're picking up on a lot of those subtle cues. And in reality, mentalists are very much just like a really finely tuned large language model, to bring it full circle for this episode.
Oz Perlman GPT. Comes out next week. Big release from OpenAI. The world's on pins and needles waiting for it.
I can only imagine. I'm really excited we talked about this. I think it's going to be really helpful for people who do want to introduce AI to their companies. I think if I were to give advice on how I would approach this kind of overall, like let's say you're kind of interested in this stuff and you want to bring change to your company, whether it's for selfish reasons to get promoted, which is totally valid and not knocking you for that, or if you're, you see as a business leader the opportunity to transform your company. I think one, play around with a lot of these tools on your own. Just be curious, try different stuff, try to vibe code or swarm code, play around with Suno and make some songs. There's a bunch of different tools in the market that do different things. And a lot of them have either free plans for consumers or very inexpensive plans for consumers. And you can actually spend time just playing around with a lot of stuff to just get a sense of what some of these tools can do for individual consumers and individual customers. Then, if you start to brainstorm how this can solve a business problem for you, start to incorporate some custom GPTs or some stuff with small groups of, team members at your company, or try to make individuals' lives easier. See how you can start to streamline some individual process stuff. And then if you really want to think about how to bring the solution to your business at scale to solve a large problem, that's when you really want to dig in and make sure you come correct with, these are all the steps that we would need if we were training a human to do this. This is going to be just as painful in terms of time investment as onboarding a new employee. The downstream effect is worth it, but just go in, coming up with that full list. And then to Matt's point, you actually look like a hero because when you present this stuff internally, you are not setting misaligned expectations. And if the vendor can deliver faster than this conservative estimate that you've given, everybody looks even better at the end of the day on top of it. So that's my holistic high level advice. And I want to see if there's anything you would add to that.
No. And in fact, the housekeeper who just walked in here, while I'm in here, said this is a good time to end. That was a bit awkward for those who saw me on YouTube doing the side eye. They're like knocking. I don't want to I don't want to cut you off while you're speaking, Justin, but they're looking to come in here. So I'd say we wrap the pod at this point. My room is not as tidy as it needs to be, so I need some assistance. But I think those are really solid points. Everybody play with the tools, set the expectations low. The outcome should be fantastic on the other side, but it's going to take a lot of time. It's worth it. But if you go in there saying it's going to be a magic trick and everyone should be expecting like ChatGPT like results, this is not artificial onboarding and integration. This is just AI.
Beautiful. Well, until next time, thank you all for tuning in. We will see you next week.